Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us for this second session today of our student-led webinar series. My name is Flanny Palha, and I'm joined by my fellow final year physiotherapy students and co-organisers, Talia and DL. We hope those of you who are joining us today for our first webinar on the role of the CSP BAME network and leadership journey found it really valuable. If you happen to miss that session, don't worry, a recording will be available soon for you to catch up on the insights shared by our previous speakers.
So this series was created specifically to support students across the UK as we navigate our studies and move into practice, but it's open to everyone. And we wanted to build a dedicated space to discuss identity, confidence, and professional development through a culturally informed lens. So these sessions are designed to help you with your portfolio building and CPD while providing a safe environment to learn from lived experiences of established professionals.
And tonight's theme is authenticity, the power of using your narrative. We are very honoured Ashila Bhutia, the Regional AHP Programme Lead for the NHS East of England. She will be discussing how to use the power of narrative and how owning your own story can change and shape your leadership and influence within the healthcare field. Thank you for being here, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you. I'm going to try and share my screen. I was just saying that Zoom is not my forte, but I hope I can manage. So, I'm sharing, yeah?
Yes.
Just give me a thumbs up. Yeah, okay. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm Ashila. Most people call me Ash. Thank you for making the time to be here today. So as Talia and the rest of the team mentioned, I'm going to share my story. And I suppose more importantly, how you can use yours, your identity, your lived experience, your voice to shape confidence, leadership, and influence. So think of this as a practical conversation about authenticity and power of narrative in real NHS. So I think I actually quite like this quote by Oscar Wilde. He says, "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken." So this quote is quite witty, but at its core, it is quite strategic as well. And why does this matter? Because in your career, authenticity builds credibility. Being true to who you are helps you communicate with clarity and confidence. Your identity differentiates you. Your background, your values, and experience give you a perspective no one else has. So professionals trust the real you, and teams work better when people show up as themselves and not as copies of someone else. So the themes for today, as we've discussed, identity and authenticity, confidence and progression, influence through storytelling, and lived experience as leadership. So that's our roadmap. And as I walk through my story, I invite you to reflect on yours. What shaped you? What tried to stop you? And what did you learn in the journey? So I was born in Sikkim, which is one of the most beautiful, I'm biased, yeah? So it's one of the most beautiful parts of northeastern India. I grew up in a town called Gangtok, a small town that taught me community, humility, ambition. My community was a tight-knit one, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone's business, if you know what I mean. Sometimes even before you know it yourself. But that closeness shaped my identity in powerful ways. It taught me what it means to belong. It taught me that you are never really on your own. People look out for you. People hold you accountable, and people genuinely care. Growing up in that kind of an environment builds a deep sense of responsibility. It also taught me humility, because in a small community, titles don't really matter. Your behavior does. How you treat people matters more than what you achieve. And that has stayed with me throughout my journey in healthcare and leadership. Well, I'm not quite sure what is happening, but
Is everything okay?
my slides are not moving. So
Perhaps you could unshare and reshare.
here you go. So that's fine. So this is the little town that I grew up in. So I just have some pictures for you to see how scenic and how beautiful it is. This was my school, in Gangtok. And this is the college which made who I am today. So this was a college of physiotherapy where I did my first degree. And it is in a place called Bangalore in South India. So moving to Bangalore truly opened my world. Coming from Gangtok, a small, quiet place, and suddenly landing in a big, bustling city, it felt like stepping into another universe. I was just 18, a little lost, a little timid, if I may say so, and very much out of the comforts of home for the first time. Now, Bangalore was louder, faster, and more crowded than I'd ever known. New languages being spoken everywhere, and I could barely keep up with everything. There was new expectations, even academically, socially, even culturally. Everything was bigger, the buildings, the classrooms, the ambition of people around me. And there I was, this girl from the hills, trying to figure out how to cross the chaotic Bangalore roads and how to navigate college life and how to speak up in a room full of confident city children who seemed to know exactly what they were doing. I remember feeling overwhelmed, but I also remember feeling ready. Nervous, yes, but I was ready. And those early days taught me resilience. They taught me to adapt quickly, to observe, to learn, and to find my voice in spaces where it felt easier to stay small. And slowly, the city that scared me became the city that grew me. That experience shaped my identity in ways that I didn't really realize then. Leaving home at 18 gave me courage, navigating a new culture gave me perspective, and pushing through the initial discomfort taught me that being uncomfortable is often the first sign that you're expanding. Then, this was my first job. I went back to my hometown in Gangtok, and my first job as a physiotherapist was in a government hospital back home, where physiotherapy was very new, let alone the patients. Even many doctors didn't fully understand. I had to create space for myself. I had to explain my role every single day and to advocate for my profession, even just to do my job. So, very quickly, I realized if I wanted to truly grow, learn, and practice physiotherapy at the standard that I wanted to practice, I needed to go somewhere, where the profession was much more established. So I looked for opportunities, UK, Canada, Australia, and in the end, UK felt like what was distant for me. So I packed my life in 2 suitcases and traveled 4,170 miles, that's what it says, across the world. It sounds brave now, but at the time it was a mix of excitement and uncertainty. I was leaving my family, my culture, everything familiar, stepping into the country I'd only imagined through books and conversations. So those 2 suitcases carried more than clothes. They carried my identity, my ambition, my hopes for what physiotherapy could look like for me. And as the plane took off, I remember thinking, if I'm doing this or if I'm going this far, I have to make this count. And then the story begins. So I landed at Heathrow. The Kiel University team was supposed to pick me up, and that was the university I was going to do my master's in neuro rehab. But whether they mixed up the dates or I mixed up the dates, I still don't know. All I know, in that moment, no one turned up. So there I was in Heathrow, all alone. This, we are talking about 2005, yeah? No smartphones, no mobile, no Google Maps, just me, my suitcase, and then I did see a phone booth. So I put every coin I had to call home. And my dad, not fully understanding the situation, said, "Oh, take a black cab to the university." I mean, bless him, he probably thought Keele University was somewhere in London. And my mother, on the other side, was panicking quietly at the other end, not really processing what had happened. But before I left home, my dad had given me an open return ticket and did say, if there was any problem, come back. So for a moment, I thought that's what I should probably do, kind of, get my return ticket and just go home. But then something said to me that going back was really not an option after all, that I had to go through to even get here. So I went up to the information desk and asked how could I get to Keele University. The man at the desk said, "Oh, take a tube to Houston." Now, did I know what the tube was at the time? Not really. But I nodded as if I understood every word, even though the accent, the environment, the pace, everything felt so completely unfamiliar. And then it hit me, the overwhelm, that I was truly alone. Until I had a stranger, a complete stranger, a Samaritan, just walked up to me and said, if I needed help. And honestly, in that moment, I thought all my prayers were being answered. He helped me pick my suitcases, logged me onto Piccadilly line, traveled with me all the way to Houston, and made sure that I was on the right train. So I'll never forget that kindness. And from Houston onwards, and from that very first moment, I found my way. Not always easily, but always with help of few Samaritans along the journey. Then I completed, like I said, my master's in neuro rehab. And then this phase of doing all sorts of odd jobs, waitressing, warehouse shifts, student support, care home shifts, all of this shaped me as much as any degree or that master's degree could. So it taught me to listen, to adapt, to find dignity in every role, and to work with empathy. So if you are juggling jobs right now, you just have to know this. Nothing is wasted. You're building your stamina, you're building your people skill, you're building that perspective. And these are skills, these are life skills that you will need, even as you kind of, carry on with your career and wherever you go. So then I landed my first job in the UK, and it was exciting. But it was also a shock to the system. I was navigating a completely new professional culture. And at the time, I was holding something called as highly skilled migrant visa, which actually came with its own pressure. You constantly feel that, you have to prove that you deserve to be here because you're on that highly skilled migrant visa. So I did land a job. So clinical supervision, preceptorship was nothing like what it is today. So it was all inconsistent. Expectations were very, very high. And as a minority woman in a system that I didn't fully understand, I often felt invisible. I very quickly realized that if I want to be seen, or if I want to be successful, I have to be twice as prepared, twice as competent, and twice as resilient. So that lived experience shaped my work ethic deeply. I wasn't, it wasn't about perfectionism. At the time, it was about survival, and it was also about pride. So I made that decision, not being the best was not a choice. And the mindset didn't just help me cope at the time, but it sharpened my practice and built my confidence and laid the foundations of the leader that I would eventually become. So what did I do? I invested heavily in my continuous professional learning. So all these courses that you're seeing on the screen, I completed all of that, whether it was Bobard, and because I was in neurology, that's my specialty. So whether I kind of did the basic Bobard, the advanced Bobard, Pilates, functional electrical stimulation, acupuncture, splinting, soft and scotch splinting, medical legal expertise, you name it, I did every single course under the sun. Anything that would make me stronger, more skilled physiotherapist. But the point isn't just the list, it's the intention. Yeah, I didn't want for the NHS to build me. I built myself. I did every course I could because I wanted my skills to speak for me. And if I'm honest, part of that came from my lived experience as an international recruit, as a minority woman. I felt that if I wanted to be at par with my white colleagues, I had to earn the credibility. And the credibility I would earn is from the knowledge I would gain. Beyond that, I carried on learning. I kind of then went on to get a job as an advanced clinical specialist role in stroke and neurology. From then on, I did post-graduation degrees in non-medical prescribing. I did strategic leadership course. I did master's modules. I did, again, a postgraduate degree on botulinum toxin injection therapy for spasticity. I mean, like I said, you name it, and I've pretty much done everything. So, I just realized that, if I wanted to expand my impact, this is what I needed to do. So I was growing into someone who could shape services, not just deliver them. And on a personal note, by that time, I was a mother. And this again changed my perspective. It taught me prioritization, compassion, boundaries, the boundaries that probably until now I didn't really think about. But once I was a mother, I started thinking about my boundaries as well. I mean, these are quiet and powerful leadership skills. So these experiences just didn't develop my expertise. So they did shape me as a leader and who I was becoming. And then that growth paved the way for the next chapter. I stepped into workforce transformation roles. So I then kind of landed a job as a nursing midwifery and AHP workforce transformation. So I broadened my horizon. I stepped into doing a bit of nursing, a bit of midwifery. Then I got a fellowship with Health Education England. I worked as a fellow for Health Education England for about a year. And then one of the biggest breaks or the biggest learning curve, I would say, was leading the COVID immunization program for the hospital that I was working for. Now, this was a big thing because until now, no AHP was given a clinical lead, or at least I didn't know of, to lead a vaccine program. Generally, it would be the medics or the nursing staff, but, this time round it was me. So it was again a completely refreshing new change for me. So these roles meant learning new language, new system, new strategy. Influence then suddenly became less of being the most knowledgeable clinician in the room, and it became about aligning people, aligning data, aligning purpose. And yes, I'm not going to lie, imposter feeling still showed up. But each time, I think every time that feeling came, I chose courage over being comfortable. And that choice again and again is what carried me forward. So I also have a portfolio role in teaching. I do a visiting lecturer at King's College. I do kind of take the neurology module for the assistant clinical practitioners. And I go to India often, and a simple act of giving back. So I do quite a lot of workshops and things like that. And one thing that I learned in teaching that probably would be helpful for you also is, knowledge sticks when you're connected with a story. So students remember what they feel. So, if you are wanting to take that route, lead with narrative and anchor that with evidence. And I say that, that sense of responsibility of wanting to widen the path for others, naturally carried into my current role. So my current role as a regional AHP program lead for the East of England. And I also am the chair of the Ethnic Minority AHP network for the region. And I do see firsthand how representation changes rooms when people recognize themselves in leadership. Confidence rises, engagement deepens, and I think ideas flourish. So this is my role. I mean, I've just listed what I generally do. So it's a lot around leadership, governance, workforce transformation, collaboration between ICSS, the higher education institutes, provider organizational, national bodies. There's a lot of work around commissioning, championing about AHPs, building bridges, sharing and learning, and celebrating, more importantly, celebrating the AHPs and celebrating the equity and inclusion of AHPs. So just coming to the barriers, to becoming us, of who we are. So I think every journey has barriers, moments that test us, who we are and who we are becoming. For me, these barriers shaped my identity, my confidence, and ultimately, I would say my leadership. But instead of listing mine straight away, I want you to take a moment and think about one barrier you faced that shaped you in your studies, your confidence, or in your sense of belonging. So think about something, write it down if you can. It could be something personal, cultural, academic, or something you've never said aloud. So if you feel comfortable, write that down or just hold that in your mind, because this is where authenticity starts. Naming what tried to hold us back so we can own the story of how we can move forward, if you know what I mean. And that's the start of influence, yeah? So talking about the language of influence, so there are 4 themes, I think, and I discussed, or I kind of have said at length about knowing yourself, then knowing your audience, and then knowing your subject, and then telling your story. So let's break it down, yeah? So knowing yourself. So when we talk about influence, it can feel like something reserved for people in senior roles. But influence actually begins much earlier, isn't it? For many of us, especially those with lived experience, which are shaped by the barriers I discussed, influence starts with authenticity. Everything that I've shared about my journey so far, the barriers, the discomfort, the growth, feeds directly into these 4 pillars. So my barriers forced me to understand who I am, yeah, what my values are, what do I stand for. And that self-awareness is the root of confidence and leadership. Emotional intelligence matters. Notice your impact, manage your energy, stay curious, use your reflective practice and feedback loops to grow. Confidence comes from knowing yourself and doing the work. So your self-awareness and your personal strengths, very, very important. Now, what did we say? Knowing your audience. Now, stakeholder value different things. Yeah, different stakeholders are valuing different things. So, if you are in amongst the executives, they may focus on outcomes, sustainability. Clinicians will focus on workflow, patient care. Students will focus on development, support. So, frame the same idea in the language each group uses. So, you need to know the currency. Yeah, who understands what. So influence is about what they hear. Like, what are you saying? What are they hearing? It's not about what you say all the time. So when you're navigating new systems, new cultures, or moments where you didn't feel you belonged, you actually learn very quickly how to read the room and adapt yourself. And try to adapt yourself without losing yourself, is what I say. Now, knowing your subject. Remember, I talked so much about building credibility, investing in myself, doing all sorts of courses. That's knowing your subject, building that credibility. So I could be in any role, but if I didn't have the clinical mileage, or if I didn't have the clinical background, then I couldn't really sell my vision, because often in my role, I'm talking to a group of clinicians. So if I'd not walked the path, then I can't really say, those are your hurdles, or that's a difficult path, or this is an easy. So if I not walked that path, I don't think I could have, or I can't give the vision. So knowing your subject, building that credibility is very, very important. And credibility rises when your story is backed by evidence. So every challenge pushed me to build credibility through knowledge and skill. Expertise became my grounding when sometimes confidence wavered. So know your data, know your KPIs, know your patient outcomes, your package, and package that into simple language, clear messages, and what is in for the audience that you're delivering for. Whether this is, your interview, whether this is what you're writing in your personal statement, think of it that way. And then is your authenticity, your power, your story, your lived experience. So that is your power. It's not your weakness. Often sometimes we kind of think that, kind of being too vulnerable might be your weakness, but you need to change your vulnerability and kind of change that into your strength. It is your influence when you speak from truth. So people listen to you differently. So these pillars aren't just abstract theory. They come from the barriers that I faced, and I think that it resonates with many of you. And they're the same pillars you can use to turn your experiences into confidence. So I think when people tell stories with your lived experience and with everything else that we were talking about, I'm sure people will remember and people will act. And then I think embracing your identity and championing inclusion is very important. See, we all want to fit in, right? That's human. But what I learned very early, standing in Heathrow completely alone, is that when you try so hard to fit in, it is not belonging. It's almost disappearing. So real belonging comes when you embrace your uniqueness, your roots, your accent, your culture, your values, and you let those shape how you show up. And here's the important part, embracing identity isn't just personal, it's organizational. Teams, services, systems get better when different voices, when diverse voices are at the table. Diverse perspectives help us lead better. It allow us better decision making. So use your story, your lived experience to open doors for yourself, of course. And once you walk through them, hold those doors open for those who need to see someone like you on the other side. So I think I'll end here. So thank you for being here, and I'd love to hear your reflections and questions. So if there's anything, feel free. I'm going to have to end the slideshow. And I think I did end the slideshow, and let me stop sharing.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Ash. That was so inspiring, and it's lovely to hear your story and your journey. And I'm sure a lot of people feel really heard and supported. And I think it's very inspiring to take a look back at our own personal stories and how we can use those as our professional strengths.
So we'd now like to open the floor for any questions. Just wanted to say, this is a safe and empowering space for any questions and even a conversation, whether you have a question for Ash about her career journey or how you can go about navigating your own identity on placement. Please feel free to type in your questions in the chat or raise your hand or unmute, anything.
While we wait for questions to come into the chat, I'd like to start with one, Ashila. You spoke about the power of narrative in leadership. For those of us just starting clinical placements, how can we begin to own our story in a way that builds professional credibility with educators, especially when we might feel like our lived experiences don't fit in the traditional professional mold?
It doesn't matter. Your story is yours, so you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be a professional physiotherapy or AHP related story. Whatever you've done so far, you must have done something. There might be some voluntary work that you've done unpaid work, even something that kind of, things that happened in school, whatever you must have, whether you did it in school council, every experience that has shaped you to being who you are is worth putting in your narrative when you're writing your CV, or when you're kind of putting in that application. So you don't have to, and everybody understands that you are not going to be when you're kind of starting fresh, you'll not have those professional experiences. But what are your transferable skills is what you want to think. So whether you've kind of helped an elderly neighbor cross the road, or whatever you've done, just it's a story that you build.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We'll just monitor the chat as well to see if there's any questions that come in.
So we have a question asking about how students can ask their educators or lecturers for support with wanting to use their lived experiences as strength. So how to sort of go about that, I guess.
I think it's just a question you ask your educators, and you kind of, it's something that you probably just need to ask them and see how they support you. If you don't ask, you don't get, isn't it? So I'm not quite sure, because obviously, also you have to kind of try and see if there's anything around pre-preceptorship programs in your universities. Every university will have an employability team, or a department. So go to that department and say, I've got to apply, or I need to kind of write my personal statement. Could you please help me write my lived experience in a certain way? So I'm sure they will help. And the pre-preceptorship model that is there, try and utilize that. Go to NHS England website, you will see something called a Step into Work for AHPs. They've got quite a lot of different ideas and things like that as well. So yeah, and what I would say is kind of start, if you need some sort of coaching or mentoring, try and see who could support you. If there's a mentor, you can, it's always good to build your networks who are already working, or somebody who's kind of, just kind of landed a job recently. You don't always need someone really senior to be your coach. You can go to the next, because they will be much more in tune with what is happening in the job market and all of that. Look up to your CSP. You've got so much resources in your graduate entry resources as well. So there's a lot out there.
Yeah, definitely. I know me, Flanny, and DL have been using a lot of like the graduate resources, especially from Jess as well. We also have a question from Sri in the chat.
Yep, so it says, how and when did you decide to move out of a clinical career into a portfolio career? And what advice would you give to those who aspire to do this?
So, to be honest, to tell you the truth, that wasn't the part of the plan of kind of moving out from a clinical role. But like I said, I did my independent prescribing, that kind of did my toxin injections. So I was running clinics for spasticity and all of that. And I just felt that in this particular area, they call you as a advanced clinical practitioner, but I'm talking about now 10 years ago, the pathway wasn't as the portfolio route of being an ACP, or that pathway of going into a consultant AHP practitioner role wasn't as defined as what it is today. So had that pathway been defined, I don't think I would have moved, because my aspiration was to be a consultant neuro physiotherapist. That was my aspiration. I'd not really thought about anything else. But because those pathways were not as defined, I almost took upon myself to say, how can I change this? So what should I do? What kind of transformation should be there for people like myself? So I went and had a conversation with my chief nurse, and that is when she said, well, perhaps there's a role that's coming up, which is, in the workforce and transformation. Why don't you do a fellowship and see whether you can get through the fellowship first, and see what are the barriers? And so, to be honest, I took that step quite selfishly, wanting to see what is out there, what can I do in order to kind of build my career clinically. But then when I stepped out of that, I realized that there's so much to do and there's so much to offer. And I would still very happily kind of go back into a clinical setting. But in this space, there is a lot to be done. And people like myself with lived experience, people who know the barriers, people who know like what hurdles are there in order to kind of, because there's still not many consultant AHP roles, there's not many consultant physio roles. So I think it was more around that stream, if I've answered your question. But my advice to everyone would be clinical mileage is very, very important. You can't just kind of step into some sort of a workforce transformation or some sort of that kind of a role unless and until you've kind of walked that path. Like I've said, you need to be able to kind of see what are the hurdles, what are the barriers, what are your opportunities. So then when you move into that role, you are credible. Otherwise, it's yeah.
And we've got a question from Simona as well.
So it says, I get question in a few interviews that what is your strength and weakness? Could you suggest what should I reflect as a physio?
Right, so I can't really tell what your strength and what your weakness is, but I think that's an important reflection, Simona. I think what you need to do is really write down, do a SWOT analysis, put down what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and see, like I've said, how can you turn that weakness into some sort of a strength? Yeah, and work on that. Do some reflective practice and see how you can, some sort of a diagnostic tool you need. So kind of just have a bit of a problem list, like how you would do as a physio. So have a bit of a problem list and see how you can overcome those problems and see how you have done it. And then that is your transformation. That is what you can then share, that I did a bit of analysis on myself, and while these were my strengths, these were my weaknesses. And then after that, I've put in these interventions on myself. I've kind of gone, I don't know, for coaching, for mentoring. I've added these skill sets, and then I've kind of, these were the outcomes. So this is what, and then that's a reflection piece that you have. But you've got to do something. It's not just about listing your weakness. It's about listing your weakness, getting some sort of an intervention on those weaknesses, and what was the output.
Lovely. Hope that answered your question, Simona. We've also got a question from Ra. You mentioned about imposter syndrome. What's your story on overcoming it?
Oh God. Truth be told, I don't think I have overcome imposter syndrome. And sometimes I do feel that if I completely overcome that, then I think, the space to grow is slightly less. you have to have a little bit of anxiety somewhere, not to the extent that it kind of completely, kind of rattles you. But I think what I would say is practice. The more you practice, the more you are in those spaces, the more you are doing it, you kind of, overcome it. But I don't know, Raj, if I could truly say that I have no imposter syndrome, I have arrived now. I don't think I can say that.
Okay, the next question we've got is from Mark. It says, what small actions can early career physios take to build confidence and professional identity?
So the small steps are that everything that you're doing in uni, I think some sort of a reflective log is your small step, whether you've kind of I don't know, done a lecture, when you're doing a practical session, what did you lead on? You kind of led on something. There was an uncomfortable situation between, your group, or how did you handle that? If there was a group activity that was supposed to be done and you found that you were not gelling with the group, how? So, when somebody was asking, if I don't have those lived experience, what do I do? So these are your lived experience. What are your lived experience as a student? Life is not going to be hunky-dory all the time, is it? You will have differences, you will have opportunities, you will have disagreements. So how have you overcome that? What did you do in a small little way? But do your reflections, write a journal, write something every day. So when you reflect back, you think, oh, okay, I could use this example. That kind of a thing. Sorry, what was the second part of the question? There were two parts to this question, wasn't it?
Yep, it just said, what are the small actions can early career
Oh,
physio?
and your professional identity, yeah, and then that's it. Like, joining the CSP as a student, that's your professional identity. I can't stress enough about the importance of collective identity, being together in a group, coaching, mentoring, that kind of a thing. So yeah, it's just kind of being in some sort of a professional group in whatever capacity that is, that would help.
Lovely, thank you. We've got another question from Keshav, who is new to the UK. Welcome. Pursuing MSc Pharmacology. And his question is, how can I start my way in gaining experience smartly, aiming for clinical or non-clinical sectors, maybe in NHS? And yeah.
So it's a tough question, and I know as international students, it's always, or we feel that it is difficult to kind of get experience. So I would say start off. In order to gain something, you have to lose something. So you need to kind of start. If you're not getting any sort of paid, so as an international student, you can work 20 hours. I think that still holds true. So if you can go and work in some sort of your own profession, like work in a pharmacy or healthcare setting, brilliant. But if you can't, then you offer your time as volunteer or some sort of in a voluntary space initially, just when you build that credibility. Because often when people don't know you, they're not going to kind of say, oh yeah, come on, and I'm going to give you a paid job. If that's happening, brilliant. But if that's not happening, spend some time, even though if it is an unpaid work. And as you build your credibility, as you show keen eagerness in learning and they see your hard work, very often you will be provided some sort of an opportunity. So I would just say, go out, seek opportunities, network. That's very important. Go to your pharmacology, I don't know, if you have any seniors, ask them, network around, see what is available there. All I say is don't kind of shy away and don't sit in a room. You have to be out there, knocking at every door.
Okay, that's a good question, Keshav. got a question here by Raj. Would you mind sharing one of your weaknesses and how you addressed it?
Oh, difficult one. I think many actually. So when I first came to the UK, I think the biggest I wouldn't call it a weakness, but I wanted to fit in. I just wanted to be, like, I don't know how to say this, but in a very, I was proud of who I was, but in a weird way, I wouldn't showcase myself, the person I was. I wanted to be like everyone else, so I would want to fit in. So I'll tell you a story. So, every Friday there were like drinks and all of that. Now, that was just not known. Like, I'd never done anything like that, going out for drinks. And, in my part of the world, um, I wouldn't say that people, or women don't drink or anything, but at least I had not had any alcohol or anything like that. So every Friday, people from my department would go out drinking, and they would say, oh, and then you're not being a part of the team. I wanted to fit in. So I went out. And although I hated every bit of that alcohol, I just had to and I didn't even know what drink to order and what to do and how to go to a pub. And I didn't enjoy any of that because that was not who I was. But I did it just to fit in. And I think it took me a little while to actually say to people, actually, I don't like that. Let's go and have some coffee. I'll do the very same thing. Come then, Friday evening, let's have coffee and cake if you want to do that. So it took me time to kind of get that kind of a confidence of actually kind of telling people that that's your idea of fun. My idea of fun is slightly different. But you should be told very quickly. People said, oh yeah, we can do that. It wasn't, but it was my own, I think, some sort of a preconceived notion that, oh, I'm not looking cool enough, so I need to go out and have fun and go out drinking. But yeah, none of that mattered. So I don't know if it was a weakness or what, but I suppose it was a weakness. So that kind of transpired in many other things as well. Not being able to say no to people, or wanting to please people all the time, like, wanting to kind of make sure. And it took me many years to then kind of say, you know what, this is who I am, take it or leave it.
Thank you. We definitely resonate a lot with that. I think being 3 uni students in our final year now, I think we all didn't love like the drinking culture as well. It's a big struggle sometimes to try and fit in.
Yeah. But like I said, you don't have to. I said no, and I'm fine. And I'm not judging the ones who are drinking. If they love and if they want to go ahead, feel free. I mean, you're all adults, but that wasn't for me.
I've actually got a question myself. For those perhaps that don't know, can you briefly explain to us what preceptorship is?
So preceptorship is a program. So once you are, so basically what happens when you qualify and then you step into NHS setting, every organization has got a preceptorship program, which means they kind of give you pastoral support, rounded support, whether it is clinical, whether it is some sort of like, academic or whatever kind of support. So it's basically kind of getting you in the sync of that organizational culture, but also you've got clinical aspects of it, whether it is a mandatory training, how these are your departments. So it is just like those pastoral support, and it happens for over a year. There are certain preceptorship competency that one must tick when you come in. But equally, that's an organizational preceptorship. But when you are in your local department, each local department, so say you are in the physiotherapy department, so that physiotherapy department will have certain competency linked out as well for Band 5. So that's your local competency, which is different because that's academic and clinical. But the preceptorship is an overall, general kind of program that kind of, really, it's really, in other ways, it's support to make sure that you feel confident, to make sure, because it's a big jump to being a student and then going and working. And you could have difficult situations, you could be working in a difficult patient, you could be in an autonomous practitioner having to make some sort of a decision. So at least then that kind of support system is there in the form of preceptorship, and that is given to you for at least a year. And then the pre-preceptorship is before the preceptorship that happens in your university. So it is what to expect.
Yep, thank you so much for answering that. It was really helpful.
We've got another question from Manish in the chat. He said, "Thank you for reflecting on your experience and inspiring us. How can we get enrolled on a volunteering or internship role in the NHS in the field of psychology?"
Oh, in the field of psychology, I can't tell you how you can do it, but I think what you need to do is go to your local hospital, ask where your mental health teams, or go to mental health, there are some mental health specific provider organizations. So if you go there and go to the HR and ask them, do you take work experiences? Do you take any volunteers? They would be able to help. These days, Copilot does everything. So just kind of put in your the area and list the mental health hospitals and list some CAMS team or talking therapy team or psychological services. And all that you need to do is to kind of send emails and things like that. They do have work experiences in the NHS at this point in time is very limited. So I'm not going to lie. It's not going to be as easy to get work experience because there are not that many clinicians. It gets too much when you've got a student, you work experience student, apprentices, you've got new staff coming through. So for a clinician, you are overwhelmed. You prioritize all of that or you prioritize your patients. So work experience at this point in time isn't readily available. But Manish, you probably need to kind of go and look for something like Mind, like other charitable organizations, which is linked in with mental health. Try and see, there are so many charity organizations, and see if you can volunteer and see if you can, if nothing, go to hospices as well. They have there's a organization called Headway in East London. If you're based in East London, or if you actually, Headway is in Manchester and in Cambridge as well. So go on to Headway. They do all sorts of neurological rehab, and they are always looking for mental health and cognitive therapy and all of that. So, you need to try and see if you can have any opportunities there, or try and see if there's any pain team. Within the NHS, the pain team always houses a psychology or psychologist, so see, but NHS probably is not the best bet. I would say go for other voluntary and private and charity organization and see if you can find some experience there.
Okay, have we got any more questions? We'll just wait for another couple more minutes. But I think there was one question. Okay, if there's no more questions, then I'd like to thank everyone for engaging so openly tonight. It's clear these conversations are vital as part of our growth as future physios. Thank you, Ashila, once again for being here tonight and sharing about your experience and your pathway into leadership. It was really helpful and inspiring to us too.
And we definitely hope tonight's session reminded everyone that everyone belongs in this profession and your own unique journey truly does matter. Please remember that for physios, the CSP BAME network is free to join and is definitely a fantastic resource for the community and peer support.
So as we wrap up tonight's session, we'd also like to mention our next date in the series in our webinar series for Monday the 9th of March, where we'll have Jay as a speaker. So please save the date for that, and we look forward to seeing many of you there. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the evening.
The next webinar will be promoted through the BAME network. So just, keep posted on the channels, the student channels, and we'll also be posting out to student reps, so it should be sent out to all universities as well.